It's always a difficult task when taking a beloved TV series and transitioning it to the big screen.
A lot can get lost in translation from integral aspects of the characters to the very basic DNA of what made the series so watchable. The 2006 adaptation of Miami Vice was especially guilty of this, where it was devoid of the charm of the original and just opted to follow the trend of gritty realism, which did no favours for it at the box office.
And whoever told Colin Farrell that he could be Sonny Crockett were very misinformed.
Thunderbirds is a supermarionation series from the 1960s by Jerry and Sylvia Anderson that is about an American family that run a non-profit rescue organization known as International Rescue, saving people all over the world in their amazing vehicles known as the Thunderbirds. It received a rerun on BBC Two in the fall of 1991 and gained a following from a new generation 25 years since its original televised run, and spawned new merchandise that included toys, home video, and Thunderbirds apparel. Another rerun happened in 2000 with similar results.
And in 2004, a live-action movie finally happened. Has time been kind to it? It's time to find out regardless. In the immortal words of Peter Dineley, Thunderbirds are go.
Pacing and consistency are real problems with this adaptation. The movie opens up with what I think is a good reflection of the TV series, with Thunderbirds 1 and 2 performing a rescue operation at an oil rig out at sea. But it doesn't return to this setup until much later in the movie, when Alan, Fermat, and Tintin rescue a stricken monorail car underwater in the Thames River in London. Once the story reaches Tracy Island and then the other Tracy brothers and Jeff go to a John up in Thunderbird 5, courtesy of an attack by the Hood is where the story grinds to a halt, as we then focus on a 13-year young Alan who is learning the lesson of humility and patience when he tries to fire up Thunderbird 1 while not paying attention to discretion.
It's in a similar way if you try to fire up your parents' car. I mean, should you do it? I don't. I think this is the mistake that the writers made in trying to tailor the script to pander to the Spy Kids audience and not allowing it to just be a Thunderbirds movie that would have won them over anyway.
When the original series was rerun to a new generation in September 1991 on BBC Two, it captured the hearts and imagination of a new generation of children that were captivated by the adventures that their parents and possibly grandparents had been wowed by originally in the 1960s. So to have the format change to be a trend follower rather than a trend setter was a major faux pas on the writer's behalf.
But that's modern Hollywood for ya. Do the thing that's current. Which explains the tired and reused formula of the MCU. I mean, just look at Avengers 1, 2, and 4. Swap out Loki for Thanos, and then swap out Loki's staff for the Infinity Stones, and you basically have the same outcome.
Also, there's a major gaping plot hole in this movie. The story establishes that you can control Thunderbird 3 and 5 from the command post on Tracy Island, so therefore you should be able to control the remaining ships from said command post. Therefore, why did the third act of the movie even happen with the Hood being able to fly Thunderbird 2 out to London and using the mole to tunnel into the Bank of England in London?
I too only began to realise this when the late Helsing Knight 20 pointed this out in 2017 in his reaction and review of this. And I couldn't fault the man's analysis.
Furthermore, showing that the writers didn't pay enough attention to the original series, they would know that the team is called International Rescue and not the Thunderbirds. The Thunderbirds are the name of the rescue ships that the Tracy brothers pilot 1 through 5.
It's an aspect of the movie that irritated a lot of fans, especially when it seemed to be repeated ad nausea.
The characters of Mullion and Transom were unwelcomed by a lot of fans on the premise that the Hood was a one-man army in the original series and required the help of no one. So to see him have essentially hired goons rubbed people the wrong way. Additionally, the overuse of the phrases FAB and Thunderbirds are go were repeated ad nausea. To some who may be wondering, FAB just means okay, and as such, this was entered into the 2004 Oxford Dictionary. Whereas Stingray's PWOR would abbreviate as Proceeding with Orders Received, FAB just meant okay. And I think when it was used after the 8th or 10th time is when it got irritating. The use of cartoon sound effects did a lot of disservice, particularly when you hear cartoon slips when Transom is fighting Penelope, and to when we see Parker fighting Mullion, hearing a wind-up and a bell sound. It just reflects the poor writing and execution by trying to pander to a more kidified audience. There were some nice nods to the original, when the Hood is mind-controlling Brains to walk over to the control console like he's a puppet animated by strings. Similarly, there's a shot later with the launch of Thunderbird 1 when you can see strings on Lady Penelope's glove as the craft is readying for launch.
So aside from some pleasant fan service, the writing for this movie is hideous. And that's me being generous. Okay, gonna be frank here. There's only a small handful of the cast that actually put in passable performances.
Bill is easily one of the very few who actually tried as the billionaire ex-astronaut patriarch of the Tracy family, who sets up international rescue as a means of helping those in need after he lost his wife in an avalanche. He shows reasonable conviction and a sense of charisma with his delivery, particularly in front of Sophia Miles' Lady Penelope and Brady Corbett's Alan Tracy. But it's the writing that hinders his performance, as it doesn't really give him anything useful to work with in the clumsy and lackluster writing.
Had the movie gone to a sequel, I would have liked to have seen what more Bill could have done with Jeff. But this will never happen, as on February 25, 2017, Bill Paxton passed away at 61 years young. We miss you, Bill.
To be fair to Sophia, she is kind of what I would imagine as a real-life version of Lady Penelope. She has the class, sophistication, sass, and charisma, and she was very nice on the eyes. But again, it's the writing that does her no benefit, as it doesn't really cater to the type of work that would aid her more on the short-lived 2007 vampire detective series, Moonlight. My personal recommendation, go check it out, really underrated, and it's worth a look. Also, the idea of Penelope dishing out over-the-top martial arts action just seems out of place. Okay, you'd expect her to be experienced in some form of defense, but the script just went far too overboard with it.
The comic relief of the movie. Cook really captured David Graham's mannerisms from the original series as an ex-con turned butler and driver, as he would have done in the original series. I would have liked to have seen what more he could have done with the character had the writing been more faithful to the series.
Hey Goose, long time no see. Just to correct the movie, it's Hiram Hackenbacker, not Ray Hackenbacker. Other than that discrepancy, I felt like Edwards gave a decent portrayal of the chief engineer whose mind made all the Thunderbirds happen. But like with most of the characters, he's really not given enough to do to really showcase what he could do. Normally, with a protagonist, you're given a reason to be invested in them and care about them in their journey. This is not the case with this incarnation of Alan Tracy. Brady portrays him as a spoiled, whiny teenage brat that throws a tantrum just because he can't get his way of being a Thunderbird. Now, this character has been used as the love interest of Alan Tracy before, and here is no different. But like with the other protagonists, the writing is what fails her, especially when you see her having psychic powers of her own without any prelude to it. She works well with Brady and Soren Fulton's Fermat, but other than that, she really has nothing to do. Fulton plays Alan's school friend and essentially partner in crime with regards to all things Thunderbirds and the Son of Brains. Now, most fans will tell you that Brains never had a kid in the original series, of which this movie is supposed to be a prequel according to director Jonathan Frakes. Now, to be fair to Fulton, he makes use of what he has, playing to the strengths of a nerdy sidekick to Alan with intimate knowledge of security on Tracy Island and the Thunderbird craft. He's actually one of the few characters I didn't mind because he wasn't irritating. Oh, good lord, help me. You would think on paper this would be the most ideal casting decision to play the Hood, given how Kingsley has demonstrated that he can play a questionable character, such as his role as Xavier Finch in 1995's Species. But here, he just seems so bored and uninterested to where it shows in his performance. And to my understanding, he put more conviction into his performance in Blood Rain, which is considered one of his worst performances. As for the other Tracy brothers, other than Lex Shrapnel's John Tracy, who has some form of a conversation with Jeff, they're pretty much interchangeable. Philip Winchester as Scott Tracy could have been playing Gordon, and would you be any the wiser? They are literally just background characters with nothing to distinguish themselves apart. When you look back at the original series, you can tell Scott from Alan. Scott is quick-thinking and level-headed. Alan is somewhat like his original series counterpart, but he was nowhere near as whiny as this movie.
So, with the cast, strike two. Okay, I'm gonna be nice here. The effects are decent enough to where if the story had focused more on the actual rescues, then it would have made the story salvageable. And the launch of each Thunderbird are faithful to their original counterparts with some modern twists.
For example, Thunderbird 2 is taxied to its launch pad via a flat mobile pad that carries the weight of this green Leviathan transporter before it's tilted diagonally up to the sky and then launches. Thunderbird 1 has a slight alteration in that it's not descending down a tunnel before being positioned beneath the pool adjacent to the Tracy villa. Instead, the craft sits beneath a pool that's much further away from the villa, as a craft like that would cause the windows to shatter with it being that close, which is why the movie has it positioned further away, and it does its job as the scout ship, reaching speeds of 15,000 miles per hour.
Thunderbirds 3 and 5 looked believable enough, but when Thunderbird 3 was separating from the space station to depart for London, it looked a little less than perfect. The main rescue itself in London with the monorail car was well done with how murky the water looked, even if the Thames is not actually that deep in real life.
Fab 1 was built after an attempt to strike up a deal with Rolls-Royce failed, as a Rolls portrayed the iconic pink limo from the original series, as the filmmakers wanted to have some kind of connection to it. But when that failed, they opted for the model that was used that could also fly. It's one thing to have a car that can operate on water, as it's not unplausible to envision a car with hydrofoil technology, but a car with the capability of jet propulsion sustained flight was a hard pill to swallow. This idea would be used again in 2015's Thunderbirds Are Go.
But because that was a Saturday morning animated series, that could be forgiven. So, the effects are one of the few saving graces of the movie, but like I said earlier, had more rescues been written in, it would have saved the story.
Like the effects, the score does its job. Hans Zimmer took the score of the original Thunderbirds march by Barry Gray and updated it to where it's faithful and modern. It has nice moments when Thunderbirds 1 and 2 fly by Fab 1 and Alan wanting to be like his brothers, to the exciting moments when the craft are launched, and to the successful rescue of the monorail car in the river.
It builds up the suspense and tension of lifting up to the surface where the payoff is amazing for both the characters and the audience for a real feel-good moment after a successful rescue.
And the reward of Alan, Fermat and Tintin was a nice moment showing the reward for their efforts in London under pressure, and how Alan spared the Hood's life even though he didn't want to was a good highlight because he showed maturity.
I was okay with Busted's Thunderbirds Are Go back in the day, but over time I've grown disfavourable with the track, as it's a reflection of the writing that was pandering to a different demographic when it should have been focusing on the core audience.
The movie grossed a worldwide profit of $28.3 million against a budget of $57 million. When you adjust that for today's inflation, its total today wouldn't fare that much better at $39 million. The movie was critically panned by fans and critics alike for straying too far from the formula that had made the original series so timeless. Series co-creator Jerry Anderson refused to promote the movie after being offered £150,000 to attend the premiere when he had been refused to come on as a creative consultant. In retrospect, had he been allowed on, he would have more than salvaged it and actually make it watchable.
When he finally saw the movie years later, he said, and I quote, "That's the biggest load of crap I have ever seen." Personally, I think he's being far too polite, but his point holds a lot of water.
Director Jonathan Frakes, who some of you may know better as Commander William T. Riker from Star Trek The Next Generation, has not directed a theatrical movie since Thunderbirds. Now, that's not to say that his career has stalled as a director. He has gone on to direct shows like NCIS Los Angeles, Dollhouse, Star Trek Discovery, The Orville, and Star Trek Picard, reuniting with his longtime cast member and friend, Sir Patrick Stewart. But Thunderbirds remains his last cinematic directorial to this day. There wouldn't be a new adaptation of Thunderbirds until ITV Studios partnered with Pukeku Pictures and Weta Workshop to produce a reimagined series of Thunderbirds with a mix of live model sets and CGI characters and vehicles in 2015's Thunderbirds Are Go, marking the 50th anniversary of the original series and introducing the characters and vehicles to a new age that was welcomed by new fans as well as pleasing the existing fans.
FAB.
The late Sylvia Anderson commented on that the basic DNA of the show and its characters were intact so that she could recognize their traits whilst they were updated for a modern audience. They even roast the movie in Ring of Fire Part 2 with John saying,
"Scott, did you get all that?" "Yeah, he has to be joking. That list of demands is right out of a bad movie."
Depending on who you speak to, the movie has been enjoyed on VHS and DVD since 2004. I'm MJ Knight, and Thunderbirds are gone. But that's modern Hollywood for you, which explains the tired and reused formula. What's up, Doc? How did I get into a Thunderbirds movie? Wabbit. You've been interrupted in too many movies this time. But that's modern Hollywood for you. Do the thing that's current. Which explains the tired and reused formula of the MCU. I mean, just look at Avengers 1, 2, and 4. Swap out Loki for Thanos, swap out Loki's staff for the Infinity Stones, and you basically have the same outfit. Same outfit? They all wear the same outfit. It's like, how did my staff and the Infinity Stones become outfits? Never mind. Okay, I'm actually gonna be nice now. The effects in this movie are decent enough to where if the story had focused more on the actual rescues, then it would have made the story more salvageable. I'm dealing with an ear problem, folks, so if some of my words are coming through as gibberish, that's why, you know. I'm trying. The same can't be said with the rest of the movie. Oh, I will hammer that home. Good blooper.